I've never been the type to trust Airbnbs with a lot of negative reviews, but that week in March 2021, I didn't have much choice. My company sent me to a small town for a last-minute meeting, and all the hotels in the area were fully booked because of a local event. The only viable option was a cheap Airbnb that looked a bit run down in the pictures. But I thought, it's just one night. What could go wrong? When I arrived, something felt off immediately. The house was old, with peeling paint and a faint musty smell that seemed embedded in the walls. The host had left the key under a plant pot, and when I went inside, I noticed the lock on the front door looked flimsy, like it could be forced open with a strong push. I ignored it, convincing myself I was just being paranoid. As night fell, the sense of unease only got worse. The neighborhood was eerily quiet, not the peaceful kind of quiet you expect in a residential area, but a heavy silence, like people were deliberately avoiding making any noise or even stepping outside. I tried to distract myself, opened my laptop, and started reviewing my presentation for the next day. But every creak from the wooden floor upstairs sent my heart racing. Then I noticed something odd. The living room window had scratches on the frame, as if someone had recently tried to force it open. That made me uneasy, but again, I convinced myself I was overreacting. The host hadn't mentioned anything about security issues. I locked all the doors and windows, checked the front door lock 3 times, and went to bed. I tried to calm down, but I couldn't sleep. It was almost midnight when I heard it. At first, I thought it was the wind, but soon it was clear it was something else. It was a low, rhythmic noise, like someone jiggling the doorknob. My heart started pounding, and I froze in bed for a few seconds, trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was a neighbor at the wrong house or a tree branch brushing against the door. I decided to check. Grabbing my phone, I turned on the flashlight and crept toward the hallway. The noise stopped as soon as I got close to the door, but I could hear faint whispers outside. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but I knew it wasn't good. The lock, which I had checked so many times, seemed slightly misaligned. I rushed back to the bedroom, my heart racing like never before. I locked the door, pushed a wooden chair against it, and started thinking about what to do. My mind was running a mile a minute. Call the police? Text the host? While I was deciding, a sharp sound of glass shattering came from the kitchen. My blood ran cold. It wasn't a question of whether someone was trying to get in. They were already inside the house. I clutched my phone tightly and, trying to make no noise, moved to the farthest corner of the room. My hands trembled as I dialed 911, but the call didn't go through. Weak signal. Great. Just what I needed. I didn't have many options. Staying quiet seemed like the best chance I had, but the sound of footsteps in the house grew louder and closer. They were searching every room, opening drawers, knocking over chairs. My heart felt like it would burst out of my chest with every noise. Then I heard the bedroom door handle turn slowly. Whoever it was, they were trying to open the door carefully, as if they wanted to catch me off guard. I held the chair against the door with all my strength, but it shook with each push. One of them spoke, a deep, cold voice, full of certainty. "We know you're in there." My stomach churned. I had never felt so vulnerable in my life. I knew that if they got in, there wasn't much I could do. Suddenly, everything went completely silent. I couldn't hear footsteps or voices anymore, only my heart pounding in my ears. For a moment, I thought maybe they had given up. I started to relax a little when a loud bang shook the door. The chair slid back, and I almost lost my balance. Before they could break in, I opened the window and jumped out. It was a low floor, but the fall twisted my ankle. The pain was immediate, but the fear was stronger. I ran, or more like limped, as fast as I could, heading straight for the street. The house was isolated, and there wasn't a soul in sight. All I could think about was getting as far away as possible. Adrenaline kept me moving, but the pain in my ankle got worse with every step. I stumbled more than once, but I refused to stop. The only sound I could hear was my own heavy breathing, until suddenly a man's voice shouted behind me, "Hey, stop!" I instinctively turned my head and saw two figures coming out of the house. One of them was holding something shiny under the dim streetlights. A knife, probably. My body went into autopilot, ignoring the pain, and I kept limping down the street. Luckily, I found a corner with a small convenience store, one of the only places that still seemed to have its lights on. I banged on the door, yelling for help. After a few seconds, an older man cracked it open, looking wary. "What's going on?" he asked. Before I could answer, he saw the two men at the end of the street and quickly pulled me inside. Inside the store, the man locked the door and pulled out an old shotgun from under the counter. He looked as nervous as I felt. While calling the police, he whispered that this area was notorious for being dangerous, especially for out-of-towners. He said there had been several robberies at Airbnbs in recent months, and that the police rarely did more than file reports. My heart was still racing, but knowing I wasn't alone gave me a bit of relief. We stayed quiet for a while, listening carefully. I heard hurried footsteps pass in front of the store, but no one tried to come in. I felt on the verge of collapse, but I was alive, and that was what mattered. It took about 15 minutes for the police to arrive, but they were the longest minutes of my life. During that time, the man offered me a chair, but I was too tense to sit. Every shadow moving outside made my heart pound, terrified those men would come back. When the police finally showed up, I explained everything that had happened. They seemed skeptical at first, but after inspecting the house, they confirmed the kitchen window was broken, and there were clear signs of a break-in. To my surprise, they said they'd received complaints about that property before. "It's an easy target for criminals. The owner never upgrades the security," one of them said with an almost dismissive tone. That made me angry. How could someone rent out such a dangerous place? The next day, with a police officer accompanying me, I went back to the house to grab my things. What I found was devastating. The house had been completely ransacked, with drawers open, papers scattered, and even some of my clothes thrown on the floor. My laptop and a few other valuables were gone, but strangely, the thieves had left my phone, which had been hidden under the pillow. It was as if they wanted me to be able to call for help, but not without sending a clear message. They could have done worse. That thought stayed with me, leaving me feeling like I hadn't just escaped by luck, but for some reason, I still couldn't understand. After everything was over, I tried to get back to my routine, but the experience left deep scars. For weeks, I could barely sleep. Any noise in the middle of the night, whether it was a car passing by or the creak of wood in my own apartment, would jolt me awake, reliving that moment when the men tried to force the door. At work, I avoided talking about what happened. I felt like no one would truly understand what it's like to be caught between fear and uncertainty, just trying to survive. Some colleagues joked about me picking a bad Airbnb, but they had no idea how real and terrifying it was. I spent a lot of time trying to rationalize the event, but every detail, the gleam of the knife, the sound of the footsteps, played in my mind like it was happening all over again. A few weeks later, I got an unexpected call from the Airbnb host. He seemed more concerned about the negative review I might leave than about what happened. I was so angry, I almost hung up on him, but instead, I asked why he never mentioned the house's lack of security. He stammered something about not wanting to scare guests and hung up. That's when I decided to share my experience online to warn others. My post became one of the most commented on the local forum, with several people sharing similar stories about that area. Knowing I wasn't the only one brought some comfort, but it also made me realize how lucky I was to walk away from that night alive. To this day, every time I walk down a deserted street or hear footsteps at night, I get a shiver down my spine. I've always been the kind of person who loves disconnecting, and after a few rough weeks in college, the idea sounded perfect. My friend Jake and I decided to rent a remote cottage in the middle of nowhere for the weekend. It was early fall, in September, and the forest trees were already turning shades of red and gold. The cottage was simple but cozy, something we found online on a vacation rental site. The description promised peace and quiet, something rare for two students used to the chaos of campus life. The place was over 30 minutes from any small town, surrounded by dense forest. We weren't exactly experienced in remote adventures, but the idea of escaping everything was irresistible. We arrived late Friday afternoon with backpacks full of snacks and a naive enthusiasm. Our first impression of the cottage was good, even though it looked a little older than the photos showed. The wood creaked under our feet, and the smell of dust mixed with the fresh forest air. We spent some time exploring the surroundings, collecting sticks for a campfire, and laughing about how we looked like two characters from a horror movie. Night fell quickly, and when the lights inside the cottage came on, it felt even cozier. There was no cell signal, and I even liked that. Everything seemed perfect, until we noticed the first things out of place. We were in the kitchen, preparing a quick dinner of instant noodles, when Jake called me from the living room. He was standing near the door, staring at the floor. "Did you see this when we arrived?" he asked, pointing to a subtle mark on the wooden floor near the entrance. It was a footprint, or rather, several, coming and going from the door. We stood in silence for a moment, trying to rationalize it. Maybe they were ours. But when we compared, we noticed the prints were larger than our own. Jake, always practical, suggested it might have been the caretaker or the cottage owner. I wanted to believe that, but something about the pattern of the footprints didn't feel right. They didn't look fresh, but they weren't old enough to be worn out either. After dinner, things got stranger. While playing cards at the dining table, a noise caught us off guard. It was faint but unmistakable, coming from upstairs, a sort of creak like wood being stepped on. I tried to laugh it off, saying the cottage was probably just old and noisy. Jake didn't seem convinced, but agreed. "It's just the wind or something settling," he said. Despite this, I noticed he locked the door and checked the windows before we continued playing. Deep down, we were both trying to pretend nothing was weird. But that night, pretending wouldn't be enough. Later that night, we decided to light a campfire outside. The air was cold and the stars shone brightly. Without light pollution, it was the clearest sky I'd ever seen. The idea was to relax, but the tension from the footprints and the earlier creak lingered between us. Jake broke the silence, saying we were probably overthinking things. I agreed, though a part of me felt something was off. After a while, as we sat there, I heard a sound that didn't belong to the forest or the wind. It was metallic, like a tool striking something. Jake heard it too, and we both looked toward the cottage. At first, we didn't see anything, but something seemed different. The living room window, which I was sure had been closed, was now slightly open. We immediately got up, adrenaline rushing, and went back to the cottage. We entered cautiously, with Jake holding a piece of firewood as if it were a weapon. The house was silent, but the window really was open, letting in the cold night air. "Maybe you forgot to lock it," Jake said, though he didn't sound convinced. We closed and locked everything again, this time double-checking every corner of the house. The night felt endless. After returning inside, we tried watching a movie on my laptop to distract ourselves, but every sound from the forest put us on edge. Then, we heard a noise that didn't come from outside. It came from inside the cottage. It sounded like a heavy step upstairs. Jake and I exchanged looks, and his face mirrored exactly what I felt: pure fear. We gathered our courage and slowly climbed the narrow staircase. The upper floor was just a small bedroom with 2 beds and a window overlooking the forest. Everything seemed in place. But then Jake pointed to something on the floor, a trail of dirt leading from the bedroom door to the window. The window was wide open, letting in the chilly night air. There was no sign of anyone there, but the thought that someone had been in the bedroom while we were downstairs was like a punch to the gut. We closed the window and pushed a piece of furniture against it, as if that would protect us. We didn't sleep that night. We stayed in the living room with the lights on, trying not to show our fear, but every little sound made my heart race. The silence almost mocked us, making each minute more unbearable. When the sun began to rise, I felt a momentary relief. The daylight seemed to push away the oppressive feeling that had surrounded us all night. We decided it was better to leave early, even though we had 2 more days paid at the cottage. While packing our things, I noticed something that made my stomach churn. The back door, which led to the forest, was unlocked. I was absolutely certain we had locked it before going to bed. Jake also tensed up, but avoided commenting, maybe to keep me from panicking. We finished packing in silence. Outside, the scene felt strangely calmer than before, as if the forest had paused to watch us. As we loaded our bags into the car, I noticed something hanging from a tree branch near the entrance. It was a small figure made of twigs tied together with string, something that looked handcrafted but deeply unsettling. I showed it to Jake, and he turned pale. "Let's just leave now," he said without even looking back. We drove off as fast as we could down the dirt road, and as the cottage disappeared in the rearview mirror, I felt a mix of relief and dread. It felt like something was watching us, but we had no way to prove it. When we finally returned to civilization, we tried contacting the cottage owner to report what had happened. We sent messages and called multiple times, but he never responded. We couldn't tell if it was negligence or something more concerning. We decided to leave a review on the rental site to warn others, describing the footprints, the noises, and the twig figure. However, the next day, our review was deleted without explanation. This only increased the feeling that something was very wrong. Over time, I tried to move on with my life, but the memory of that weekend never left me. Sometimes I dream about the cottage window opening on its own or the twig figure swaying in the forest. Jake and I haven't spoken about it again. I think he prefers to forget, but I can't. To this day, I wonder who or what was in that forest, and whether we were just victims of a cruel prank or something much darker. A few days after we got home, I started organizing my things, and that's when I noticed something I had overlooked in the rush to leave the cottage. Inside my backpack, I found a small folded piece of paper that hadn't been there before. My heart raced as I unfolded it. It was a note, written in crooked, almost childlike handwriting. "You're lucky. Don't come back." I froze, rereading those words as my mind tried to find an explanation. Jake swore he hadn't put it there, and I knew it wasn't a prank of his. The only possibility was that someone had gone through my backpack during the night, probably while we were in the cottage, completely unaware. This discovery made it impossible to leave the experience behind. I tried to find more information about the cottage, but my online searches led nowhere. The listing had been removed from the rental site, and the owner's profile had simply disappeared. I started to suspect the place wasn't as touristic as it seemed. I even thought about going back to try to understand what happened, but just the thought of driving down that dirt road again made me nauseous. Deep down, I think a part of me knew it wasn't a good idea. Despite my efforts to move on, some nights were worse than others. Whenever silence fell, it was as if I could hear that creak from upstairs again. A simple sound, but one full of intent, and the memory of the twig figure didn't help. I started researching symbols and similar charms, but the closest I found were references to ancient rituals used to mark dangerous or cursed territories. The descriptions were vague, but one thing was clear: that figure on the tree wasn't there by accident. The worst, though, was one night when I woke up with the feeling I wasn't alone. I turned in the dark, and for a second, I swear I saw a shadow pass by the window. My apartment was on the second floor, and there was no way someone could be there. Still, the sensation of being watched was undeniable. In the morning, I found dirt marks on the windowsill, as if something had leaned against it. I called Jake, but he nervously laughed and told me to just forget about it. But how do you forget when everything around you seems to remind you of that weekend? After weeks without answers and haunted by those events, I decided to share the story with a professor who taught anthropology. He was known for being eccentric, but had a reputation for studying local symbols and legends. I showed him a picture I had taken of the twig figure, and his expression turned serious. He said it resembled an old charm from a tribe that had inhabited forests in the region centuries ago. It was used in rituals to mark territories considered dangerous or cursed. According to him, the presence of such an object was a clear warning for the living to stay away. This revelation only made things worse. I started wondering if the cottage was more than just a secluded property. Why had the owner never responded? Did he know something and not tell us? Jake, always the skeptic, thought it was all just a big coincidence. Maybe some local legend used to scare tourists. But deep down, I think even he felt something was off. The more we thought about that night, the stronger the feeling grew that we had escaped something far bigger. Then I received an anonymous email with the subject, "Were you there?" In the body of the message, there was only one sentence. They always come back for what was left behind. There was no signature, and the address was completely generic. I tried to ignore it, but that "they" kept echoing in my mind. I went straight to the backpack where I had kept the note, the dirt traces, and anything else connected to that weekend. I threw it all away in a desperate attempt to rid myself of it. But the truth is, the fear was already rooted in me. To this day, I don't know exactly what we encountered in that forest or who the mysterious visitor in the cottage was. But one thing is certain. There are places that shouldn't be visited, no matter how tempting the idea of isolation may be. Some experiences mark us in ways that even time can't erase. Jake and I have moved on, but we never speak of it again. And every time I see the trees glowing in early autumn, I remember the note, "You're lucky, don't come back." I've always preferred traveling alone. It's not that I don't enjoy company, but there's something liberating about setting my own pace and discovering places on my terms. This happened last September when I decided to take a week off to explore some hiking trails in a rural area. I found what seemed like the perfect Airbnb, a small guest house in the backyard of an isolated property. The reviews were great, all praising how attentive the host, Linda, was and how peaceful the location felt, ideal for unwinding. When I arrived, everything looked just like the photos, cozy, well-decorated, and surrounded by the soothing sounds of birds and rustling leaves. Little did I know that peace wouldn't last. Linda seemed a little too friendly. As soon as I parked my car, she came out of the main house with an exaggeratedly big smile, as if she'd been waiting for me. She insisted on showing me every detail of the guest house, how to adjust the shower temperature, where the extra towels were, even how to use the coffee maker, which I was perfectly capable of figuring out. I thanked her politely, assuming it was just her way of being hospitable. But within the first few hours, I noticed she kept stopping by. First, it was to ask if I needed extra blankets. Then, she brought over a freshly baked cornbread. The third time, she simply wanted to chat about nearby trails. I started to feel watched, but I brushed it off. After all, she was just an older woman, right? The next morning, after a quick breakfast, I decided to check out the trails she'd mentioned. The area surrounding the property was stunning, with tall trees stretching toward the sky. I walked for hours, breathing in the fresh air and listening to the wind rustling the leaves. Then, something odd happened. While walking through a denser part of the trail, I caught a faint smell of cigarette smoke. It was strange because the area was so remote, and I hadn't seen anyone except Linda since I arrived. I dismissed it and kept walking, but the smell lingered in certain spots, disappearing and reappearing. That's when I noticed cigarette butts scattered among the leaves. A chill ran down my spine, but I convinced myself it was probably left by another guest or a local passerby. When I returned to the guest house, it was almost dark. I was exhausted, so I made a simple dinner, took a shower, and went to bed early. The night was eerily silent, the kind of silence that feels heavy. I woke up in the middle of the night to a sound that didn't belong, the creak of a door. At first, I thought I'd imagined it, but then I heard another noise. Someone trying to turn the front door handle. My heart pounded. For a moment, I froze, but then I got up, barefoot on the cold floor, and grabbed a flashlight I'd left by the bed. Slowly, I crept toward the living room, trying not to make a sound. As I approached the door, the noise stopped. All I could hear was my own heavy breathing and the faint sound of the wind outside. I stood there for a few minutes, frozen, with the flashlight in hand, straining to hear anything else. Nothing. I peeked out the window next to the door, but all I saw was darkness, faintly lit by the dim porch light. There was no one. I tried to convince myself it was just the wind, but deep down I knew better. I locked the door with the key, something I hadn't thought to do until then, and went back to bed. I spent the rest of the night on edge, waking up at the slightest noise. When the sun finally began to rise, I felt relieved to have made it through the strange night. The next morning, I decided to confront Linda. I waited until I saw her step out of the main house, carrying a basket of fruit like nothing had happened. When she approached me with that overly cheerful smile again, I didn't waste any time. I asked her directly if anyone else lived on the property. She seemed taken aback by the question, almost offended. "Of course not, sweetie. It's just me here." "Why?" she asked, laughing nervously. I explained what had happened with the door and asked if she knew anything about it. Her smile faltered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "Oh, it must have been an animal. Sometimes raccoons make noise, you know. But don't worry, nothing ever happens around here," she said, her reassuring tone not matching the worry in her eyes. I returned to the guest house with a growing sense of unease. The pieces didn't add up. Why would she lie about living alone if it was just her brother? And more importantly, why would he be lurking around in the middle of the night, smoking and watching me? I decided I couldn't stay another night. I started packing my things, but with every step I took, I felt like I was being watched. I kept glancing out the window, expecting to see something, but the view of the forest only amplified my paranoia. As I loaded my bags into the car, I noticed something odd on the guest house door. There were deep scratches on the wood, as if someone had dragged something sharp across it during the night. My stomach churned. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it really was an animal, like she said. But the marks were too high, right at the level of the door handle. That wasn't something an animal would do. I got in the car, started the engine, and drove away without looking back, speeding down the dirt road until I reached the main highway. After driving for about an hour, I finally stopped at a gas station. I was exhausted and still shaking, but needed to collect myself before continuing. While waiting for the attendant to fill the tank, I checked my phone. There were several notifications, but one stood out. A message from Linda through the Airbnb app. It read, "I hope you had a safe trip, sweetie. Just a heads up, don't mention anything strange in the reviews, okay?" My blood ran cold. It was as if she knew exactly what I had experienced, and her tone felt more like a threat than a request. That night, I got home still trying to process everything. For weeks, I was obsessed, rereading the messages and searching for more information about the property. I found something that made my stomach drop. An old comment buried in the positive reviews. A guest mentioned hearing footsteps at night and seeing someone in the woods. But Linda had assured them they were imagining things. To this day, I wonder who was out there that night, whether it was really her brother or something far worse. Since then, I've never stayed in an isolated Airbnb again. And honestly, I don't think I want to know the whole truth about what happened at that place. At first, it seemed like the perfect idea. Me and my 3 friends, John, Sarah, and Mike, decided we needed a break from the city. Mike was the one who found the ad online, a rustic little cabin by a lake, super cheap, almost too good to be true. The owner, a strange older man named Mr. Peterson, said no one had rented the place in years but was happy to breathe some life back into the cabin. At the time, we thought he was just being poetic. We arrived Friday afternoon, full of excitement. The cabin was actually better than in the photos, but there was something about it I couldn't quite put my finger on. The wooden porch was slightly warped, like it had been waterlogged for years, and the air inside felt dense. Other than that, it was perfect. The first odd thing we noticed was the mail in the living room. We'd just finished unpacking our bags and were looking around when Sarah found a stack of letters on a side table, all addressed to someone named Edward D. I thought it was weird since Mr. Peterson said no one had stayed there in ages. Mike joked that Edward's ghost must be on vacation, but the whole thing made me uneasy. The letters looked recent, with fresh postmarks, and at least one had been opened. John, ever the pragmatist, suggested they'd just forgotten to collect some mail from an old tenant. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling. Why would the owner lie about how long the cabin had been empty? The night started out peaceful. We lit a campfire by the lake and spent hours telling stories. The sky was so clear you could see the stars reflecting on the water, something we never got to experience in the city. Around midnight, the wind picked up, and we decided to head back inside. By then, the letters had faded from everyone's mind. We drank wine, laughed, and everything seemed perfect, until the next morning. When I opened the front door to get some fresh air, I froze. There was a trail of wet footprints leading from the lake to our porch. The prints were large, distinct, and stopped right at our door. The strangest part? None of us had gone outside during the night. I called everyone to come see, and the carefree mood from the night before evaporated. Probably just someone from the neighborhood, John suggested, but the nearest town was at least 15 minutes away, and we hadn't seen a soul since we arrived. Sarah was visibly shaken and said we should leave, but Mike, ever the skeptic, laughed it off, claiming someone was just trying to scare us. We cleaned the porch and tried to move on, but the unease lingered. Deep down, we all knew something wasn't right, though no one wanted to say it out loud. The day dragged on, with all of us pretending everything was fine. To distract ourselves, we decided to explore the area around the cabin. The lake, which had looked so serene the night before, seemed eerie in daylight. The water was dark, almost black, and the shoreline was littered with twisted branches that looked like skeletal hands reaching out of the earth. We followed a small path that led into the woods, where we stumbled upon what looked like a crude altar made of stones with a wooden figure in the center. None of us dared to touch it, but Sarah muttered, "This isn't normal." We headed back to the cabin, even more on edge than before. When night fell, the tension was unbearable. We locked every door and window, though no one wanted to admit they were scared. We tried watching a movie on John's laptop, but none of us could focus. Around 10 p.m. we heard it, 3 loud knocks at the front door. We all jumped. Mike was the first to stand, nervously laughing and saying it was probably just a curious local. He opened the door, and no one was there. Just the silence of the night and the distant sound of wind rustling through the trees. He quickly shut the door, and no one said a word. Sarah began crying softly, and even Mike seemed rattled. We agreed that if anything else happened, we'd leave immediately. The night was restless. None of us could sleep, and the cabin felt suffocatingly quiet. The sound of the wind now seemed more like whispers, like someone pacing outside. Around 3 a.m. we heard it again, this time the creak of the wooden floor in the living room, as if someone was walking. John grabbed a flashlight, trying to appear brave, and we all followed him, huddling together. The room looked exactly as we had left it, except for one detail. The letters addressed to Edward were gone. Sarah started shaking, and no one wanted to voice the obvious. Someone, or something, was inside the cabin. John suggested we stay together until sunrise and leave as soon as it was light. We agreed, but the anxiety was palpable. Every sound felt magnified, every shadow more sinister. Then came the knock again, this time at the kitchen window. Mike, his bravado crumbling, whispered, "This isn't normal." No one wanted to pull back the curtain, but the knocking continued, persistent, like it, or they, wanted to get in. Finally, John pulled the curtain back in one swift motion. Outside, in the dim glow of the cabin's floodlight, we saw it. A tall, gaunt figure with glowing eyes staring back at us. And then, as quickly as it appeared, it was gone. After that, there was no more debating. We packed our bags in a frenzy, deciding to leave in the dead of night. Sarah was so shaken she could barely move, and even Mike looked defeated. But the worst was yet to come. As we scrambled to gather our things, we noticed something chilling. The wet footprints were back, but this time they were inside the house. They started at the front door, leading into the hallway, and disappeared somewhere near the bedrooms. My heart stopped. Whatever it was, it had been inside the cabin all along. We didn't waste another second. We piled into the car and sped down the dirt road, the headlights barely cutting through the oppressive darkness. No one dared to look back. When we finally reached the nearest town, we stopped at a gas station to catch our breath. That's when we noticed something even more disturbing: the letters. They were stacked neatly in the back seat, as if someone had placed them there deliberately. None of us knew how it was possible, but John got out and threw them into the nearest trash bin without a word. We didn't speak the rest of the way home. After that weekend, we tried to move on, but the memories of the cabin stayed with us. For weeks, I woke up in the middle of the night feeling like someone was watching me. Sarah refused to talk about it, and even Mike avoided mentioning the trip. John, however, couldn't let it go. He contacted Mr. Peterson to ask about Edward. The answer was more unsettling than we could have imagined. Edward was the last tenant before us, but he had vanished years ago without a trace. The police never found out what happened to him. We cut ties with Mr. Peterson and swore never to go back to that area. But sometimes, late at night, I still feel that eerie sensation of being watched, as if the cabin, or whatever was there, left a mark on us. We never figured out what really happened, who or what the figure was, or how the letters ended up in the car. All I know is that place wasn't normal, and maybe Edward had tried to warn us. To this day, I can't help but wonder, what would have happened if we'd stayed one more night?